If this gets found, don't drive cab 77. Don't get in. And if dispatch ever tells you to pick up a fare at Cross Point and Hollow, just keep driving. My name is Ray Mercer. I've been a cabbie for city cabs in Bentonville for 8 months now. 8 months that feel like 8 years. 8 years that feel like 8 lifetimes. I'm recording this from the backseat of my own taxi, parked in Holloman's cornfield 3 miles east of town. My hands won't stop shaking. My voice sounds like gravel in a blender, and I keep checking the rearview mirror even though I know I shouldn't. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, when I still thought the rules were just superstitions passed down by crazy old cabbies who'd been breathing too much exhaust. The divorce papers were still wet with ink when I walked into city cabs on September 3rd. Bentonville isn't the kind of place where opportunities knock twice. It's a faded Midwest town where the corn grows taller than the streetlights, and there's this strange hum that hangs in the air after midnight. Like the whole place is plugged into something you can't quite see. Marcus Webb, the dispatcher, looked me over with eyes that had seen too much of everything. He was probably 60, with skin like old leather and fingers stained yellow from chain-smoking Marlboros. "Night shift," he said without preamble. "Graveyard pays double, but most folks don't last a month." "Wait, my's that?" Marcus slid a photocopied handbook across his desk. The cover read, "City Cabs Driver Protocols, Night Operations." Below that, in smaller text, "Adherence to guidelines ensures drivers' safety and operational continuity." Read it, memorize it, follow it. His voice carried the weight of someone who'd watched too many drivers come and go, especially the highlighted sections. And flipped through the pages. Most of it was standard cab company boilerplate. How to log fares, report maintenance issues, handle difficult passengers. But interspersed throughout were what looked like rules, strange ones. Rule 1. Always pick up fares flagged in red. Their priority. Rule 2. If a passenger won't look you in the eye, don't speak unless spoken to. Rule 3. Don't check the rearview mirror between 2:55 a.m. and 3:05 a.m. Rule 4. If dispatch calls with a pickup at Cross Point and Hollow, do not go. Rule 5. Passengers that enter without opening the door are not on the manifest. Just drive. Rule 6. Never take cash from a man wearing a bolo tie. Rule 7. If you smell honeysuckle, someone is lying. Rule 8. If a passenger asks where the cemetery is, don't answer. You'll wake it. I looked up at Marcus. Is this some kind of joke? He wasn't smiling. Uber pulled out of Bentonville in 2021. Officially, they said it was market saturation. Unofficially, he tapped the handbook. GPS never works right here after midnight. Satellites lose signal. Cell towers go dark for minutes at a time. And drivers started reporting irregularities. What kind of irregularities? The kind that make people quit driving at night. Marcus leaned back in his chair. Look, Ray, I need night drivers. You need a job. Follow the rules, collect your fares, and everybody goes home happy. Break them, he shrugged. Well, let's just say our insurance doesn't cover everything. I should have walked out then, should have recognized the weight in his words, the careful way he avoided looking directly at me when he spoke about the rules. But Cheryl had taken half of everything in the divorce, including my self-respect, and I needed the money. When do I start? Tonight. Cab. 77's your ride. Jimmy Castellanos will show you the routes. Jimmy Castellanos looked like he'd been driving cabs since they invented the wheel. His face was a road map of wrinkles, and his eyes held that 1,000-yard stare you see in war movies. When I met him in the city cabs lot, he was sprinkling something white around the driver's seat of cab 77. "Salt," he said without looking up. "Keeps things grounded." "Things? You read the handbook?" "Yeah, but I figured..." "Don't figure." Jimmy straightened up, fixing me with a stare that could have melted steel. "First night, You ride shotgun, watch, learn, keep your mouth shut, and your eyes open. Cab 77 was a beat-up Crown Vic with over 300,000 miles on the odometer. The interior smelled like coffee, cigarettes, and something else. Something sweet and cloying that reminded me of funeral flowers. The radio crackled with static, and the meter had been replaced with something that looked homemade, all exposed wires and analog dials. Custom job, Jimmy explained, catching my stare. Standard meters don't work after midnight. This one counts. Differently. We drove through Bentonville's empty streets. During the day, the town looked tired but normal. Grain silos, a few fast food joints, houses with sagging porches and chain-link fences. At night, it transformed into something else entirely. Streetlights cast circles of sickly yellow illumination that seemed to bend at the edges. Shadows moved independently of their sources, and that that constant, almost subsonic vibration grew stronger. Our first fare was waiting outside Mel's Diner on 3rd Street. A woman in her 30s, clutching a purse like it contained the crown jewels. "Evening, Sarah," Jimmy called through the rolled-down window. She got in without saying a word, avoiding eye contact in a way that felt deliberate. "Rule 2, Jimmy whispered to me. "She won't look at us directly. We don't speak unless she does first." The ride was silent, except for the engine and that ever-present hum. Sarah gave directions in a voice so quiet I had to strain to hear her. When we dropped her off at a house on the edge of town, she paid with exact change, bills that felt too old and too cold, and disappeared through a front door that closed without her touching it. "What was that about?" I asked as we drove away. "Sarah Hendricks, been riding with us for 3 years. Every Tuesday night, same route." Jimmy checked his watch. "Always pays exact change. Never tips. Never says thank you." "Okay, but what's with the whole not looking at us-use thing?" Jimmy was quiet for a long moment. "Some passengers see too much when they look directly at drivers. Better for everyone if they don't." The radio crackled. Marcus's voice came through distorted. "Unit 77, pick up at Maple and 5th, single fare, destination unknown." We drove to the intersection. No one was there. "This happens sometimes," Jimmy said, parking under a streetlight that flickered arrhythmically. "Ghost calls, dispatched from coordinates that don't quite exist." As we waited, I noticed movement in the shadows across the street. A figure that might have been a person, or might have been a trick of the light, standing perfectly still near a bus stop that had been abandoned for years. "Jimmy, don't look directly at it," his voice was sharp. "Just peripheral vision. If you stare too long, it'll know you can see it." The radio crackled again. "Unit 77, disregard previous pickup. Return to service." We drove away, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us go. By my second week, I was driving solo. Jimmy had taught me the routes, shown me which streets to avoid after 2 a.m., basically anything ending in ridge or hollow, and left me with one final piece of advice: trust the rules, even when they don't make sense, especially then. The night of September 9th started normally. A few standard fares. Late shift workers heading home, bar patrons too drunk to drive, insomniacs seeking midnight cigarettes from the only 24-hour gas station in town, the kind of routine that makes you forget you're operating in anything other than a perfectly normal taxi service. Then came 2:55. I was driving north on Elm Street when I remembered Rule 3. Don't check the rear view mirror between 2:55 to 3:05. It seemed arbitrary, like something designed to mess with drivers' heads. I'd been avoiding mirrors during that window for 6 nights straight, but curiosity finally got the better of me. At exactly 3:01, I glanced up. For a split second, I didn't see myself. The face looking back had my eyes, my nose, my general bone structure, but the skin was wrong. Too pale, too tight, stretched over features that weren't quite in the right places. And it was smiling. Not a human smile, but something that understood the mechanics of smiling without grasping the concept. The moment lasted maybe half a second. Then my reflection snapped back to normal, leaving me with pounding heart and sweating palms. I pulled over, hands trembling as I reached for my phone to call Jimmy. No signal. The screen showed full bars, but when I dialed, nothing happened. Just dead air and that omnipresent hum growing louder. The radio crackled. Unit 77, pickup requested. Crosspoint and Hollow, priority fare. Crosspoint and Hollow. Rule 4. If dispatch calls with a pickup at that location, do not go. Dispatch, this is Unit 77. I'm showing that location as restricted in my handbook. Static. Then Marcus's voice, but different somehow. Flatter, like someone reading from a script. Negative Unit 77, proceed to pickup. Priority fare requires immediate service. Marcus, I'm looking at Rule 4 right now. It specifically says, there is no Rule 4, Unit 77. Proceed to Crosspoint and Hollow. I hung up and grabbed my handbook. Pages 1 through 15 were there. Page 17 and beyond continued normally, but page 16, the page with Rule 4, was gone. Not torn out, not missing. It simply wasn't there, as if it had never existed. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The rules change when you break them. Drive east. Don't stop until sunrise. I drove east for 3 hours, not stopping until the sun crested the horizon and Bentonville's strange hue finally faded to silence. After the mirror incident, my fares began to change. On September 11th, I picked up a man outside the abandoned Woolworths. He was well dressed, maybe 50, with the kind of smile that belonged in a toothpaste commercial. He got in, gave me an address on the south side of town, and spent the entire ride asking questions about myself. Ray Mercer, right? Recently divorced. Ex-wife Cheryl took half your savings and your dog? I hadn't told him any of that. How do you... Word travels fast in small towns. He was still smiling, but it never reached his eyes. Tell me, Ray, do you ever miss the person you used to be? When I glanced in the rearview mirror, he was gone. The backseat was empty. I spun around, nothing there. When I turned back to the road, he was sitting in the passenger seat beside me. Don't worry, he said. You'll understand soon enough. When we reached his destination, he handed me a crumpled $20 bill. I smoothed it out, and it was covered in my own handwriting. A grocery list I'd written 3 weeks earlier, before I'd ever heard of city cabs. September 14th brought a woman who spoke only in questions. Do you know why the birds don't sing here after midnight? Have you noticed how the streetlights flicker in patterns? Can you see the way shadows move when they think you're not watching? She smelled like honeysuckle. Rule 7 warned that scent meant someone was lying, but every question she asked felt like truth wrapped in riddles. September 18th, a teenager who claimed he'd been waiting for this exact cab, driven by this exact driver, for 3 years. He paid with coins that were warm to the touch and left behind a folded page torn from a book. When I unfolded it later, it was covered in my handwriting. A short story I'd never written about a cab driver who gets lost in his own reflection. Each fare left me more unsettled than the last. They knew things they shouldn't know, spoken half-truths and backwards prophecies, and always seemed to be preparing me for something I couldn't quite grasp. The radio calls became more frequent. Marcus, or the thing that sounded like Marcus, would dispatch me to pickups at increasingly strange locations. The intersection of 2 streets that didn't connect, the parking lot of a business that had been demolished 5 years ago, coordinates that existed only in the spaces between other places. And always, there were calls for Crosspoint and Hollow. Unit 77, priority pickup, Crosspoint and Hollow. Dispatch, Rule 4 specifically prohibits. There is no Rule 4, Unit 77. I'd check my handbook. The page would be missing, as if it had never existed. But when I got home and looked at the photocopied pages I'd hidden in my apartment, Rule 4 was always there, written in fading ink that grew fainter each time I read it. Jimmy's warning. Recorded conversation, September 26th, 2:15 a.m. Jimmy found me parked outside the all-night gas station on Highway 9, staring at my reflection in the side mirror and trying to convince myself I still looked like myself. "You're losing it," he said, sliding into the passenger seat uninvited. Then the rules keep changing. Pages disappear from my handbook. Dispatch is sending me calls that don't make sense. Jimmy nodded like this was the most normal thing in the world. "How long since you broke Rule 3? 2.5 weeks. They're circling closer now, testing your boundaries." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small cloth bag. "Salt. Keep it in your pocket. Won't stop them, but it might slow them down." "Stop what, Jimmy? What the hell is going on in this town?" Jimmy was quiet for a long time, staring out at the empty highway. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of too many nights spent driving through shadows that moved wrong. "Bentonville sits on something old, Ray. Something that was here before the town, before the roads, before the people. Most folks sense it just enough to stay inside after midnight. But drivers like us, we're out here in the between hours, moving through the spaces where reality gets thin. You're talking about ghosts and talking about echoes." Jimmy turned to look at me, and his eyes held depths I hadn't noticed before. Impressions left behind by things that happened, things that might happen, things that never quite finished happening. They can't exist in the daylight world. Too much noise, too much certainty. But at night, in the quiet spaces between destinations, they can almost become real. And they want what exactly? They want to ride back into the world. They want flesh and blood and breath to carry them across the threshold from echo into existence. Jimmy's hand moved to the door handle. "The rules weren't designed to protect passengers, Ray. They were designed to protect us from becoming vehicles for things that shouldn't exist." Before I could respond, the radio crackled. "Unit 77, priority fare. Passenger requesting immediate pickup. Crosspoint and Hollow." Jimmy's face went pale. "Don't answer it." "Unit 77, respond immediately. Fare is flagged as high priority." "Ray, don't." I reached for the radio. The words came out of my mouth without my permission. "Unit 77 responding. En route to Crosspoint and Hollow." Jimmy grabbed my wrist. "The salt, Ray. Whatever happens, keep the salt in your palm and don't let go." He was out of the cab and walking away before I could ask what he meant. The radio crackled once more. "Unit 77, passenger is waiting. Do not delay." I drove toward Crosspoint and Hollow with Jimmy's salt burning cold in my clenched fist. Field report, September 26th, 2:44. Crosspoint and Hollow exists at the edge of Bentonville's industrial district, where the old textile mill squats like a concrete cancer against the skyline. During the day, it's just an intersection. 2 potholed roads meeting at perpendicular angles, marked by a stop sign that's been bent at an unnatural angle since before I arrived in town. At night, especially after 2 a.m., the geometry becomes negotiable. I arrived at 2:44 a.m. to find the intersection shrouded in fog that hadn't been there 5 minutes earlier. The streetlights cast weak circles of illumination that seemed to bend and fold at the edges, and the familiar hum of Bentonville's midnight hours had evolved into something deeper, a bass note that I felt in my bones rather than heard with my ears. There was no passenger waiting, just fog, an empty road, and a shadow at the edge of the textile mill parking lot. The shadow was woman-shaped, standing perfectly still with its back to the intersection. Not moving, not breathing, just present in a way that made my teeth ache. I sat in the cab for 5 minutes, engine idling, waiting for something to happen. The meter clicked steadily upward, despite having no passenger. The radio remained silent, and the shadow never moved. Then, without sound or visible motion, the rear passenger door was opened and someone was sitting behind me. I didn't see her get in. One moment the back seat was empty, the next was occupied by a woman in her 30s with dark hair and clothes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. When I glanced in the rearview mirror, she was looking directly at me with eyes that were the wrong color. Not brown or blue or green, but the color of deep water at night. "Hello, Ray." Her voice was familiar in a way that made my skin crawl. "I've been waiting for you." "Where to?" "Anywhere with doors still open." Rule 5 echoed in my mind. Passengers that enter without opening the door are not on the manifest. Just drive. I put the cab in gear and pulled away from Cross Point and Hollow, noting that the fog followed us like smoke from a stubborn fire. "You broke the rules," she said. "Looked in the mirror when you shouldn't have. Now everything's changing." "Who are you?" "I'm what you saw looking back." She leaned forward, and when I glanced in the mirror again, her face was directly behind mine, occupying the same space as my reflection. "I'm the echo of Ray Mercer, and I've been trying to find my way home." The road ahead began to curve in ways that defied the geography I knew. We were driving north on Elm Street, but somehow the grain silos were on the wrong side, and the houses I passed looked like mirror images of themselves. Familiar, but reversed. Wrong in subtle ways that accumulated into wrongness too large to ignore. "The town's been calling us for years," she continued. "Echoes of everyone who ever lived here, ever died here, ever left something unfinished. We exist in the spaces between certainty and possibility, but we can't cross over without a driver." "What do you want from me?" "I want to finish becoming real." Her smile was my smile, but twisted into something that understood smiling without comprehending joy. "I want to take your place in the world of flesh and breath and morning coffee and arguments with ex-wives." The cab's clock began ticking backward. 2:45 a.m. became 2:44, then 2:43. Outside the windows, the same stretch of road repeated in an endless loop. The grain silos, the Bent Street sign, the house with the broken fence that I'd passed 3 times now. "You can't keep driving forever, Ray. Eventually you'll have to stop. And when you do..." She reached forward and placed a hand that felt like cold water on my shoulder. "I'll step out of the mirror and into your life." Jimmy's salt burned in my palm. I squeezed harder, feeling the crystals cut into my skin. "What happened to the other drivers?" "What other drivers?" But her laugh gave her away. "Oh, you mean Tommy Brennan and Lisa Chin and Marcus Webb. The real Marcus Webb, not the echo that's been dispatching your calls for the past 2 weeks." The road continued its impossible loop. Same houses, same streetlights, same shadows that moved independently of their sources. They're still driving, in a way, somewhere in the spaces between destinations, carrying passengers who echo louder than they do. She leaned closer, and her breath smelled like funeral flowers and abandoned promises. "Would you like to see them?" The loop broke suddenly, like stepping through an invisible membrane into a different version of reality. One moment we were cycling endlessly through the same stretch of Elm Street. The next, we were driving through downtown Bentonville, but a downtown that existed only in the spaces between the real one. The buildings were the same, but wrong. Mel's Diner was there, but the neon sign spelled Mel's Diner, and the windows showed the interior of a restaurant that served food I didn't recognize to customers whose faces I couldn't quite focus on. The old Woolworth's was open, its display windows full of merchandise that looked like it had been designed by someone who'd heard descriptions of human possessions but never actually seen them. And there were other cabs. Unit 15 was parked outside the bank, its engine running and door hanging open. Through the windshield, I could see Tommy Brennan behind the wheel, but his eyes were closed and his head was tilted back at an angle that suggested his neck was broken. His passenger, a woman in a wedding dress that had been white once upon a time, was leaning forward, whispering something in his ear that made his lips move in silent response. Unit 23 idled at the intersection of Main and 3rd. Lisa Chin sat in the driver's seat, perfectly still, while 3 passengers in the back argued in voices that sounded like wind through broken glass. One of them noticed me watching and waved, with fingers that bent in too many directions. "Welcome to the fleet," the echo of Ray Mercer said from behind me. Everyone finds their way here, eventually. I counted 8 cabs total, each one containing a driver who looked like they were sleeping or dead or something in between. Their passengers were uniformly wrong, too tall, too pale, moving in ways that suggested they were remembering how to be human rather than simply being human. What are they doing? Waiting, driving, serving. She gestured to encompass the impossible downtown. This is where the echoes live when they're not riding in the real world. Between destinations, between moments, between what is and what might be. Unit 77's radio crackled to life. All units. New driver orientation in progress. Please maintain positions for demonstration purposes. The voice was Marcus Webb's, but flattened and mechanical, like a recording played back at the wrong speed. He's been dead for 3 weeks, my passenger explained. Massive heart attack in the dispatcher's booth, but his echo keeps working the radio, sending out calls, managing the fleet. Death is just another shift change in Bentonville. I drove slowly through the ghost downtown, past storefronts that sold impossible things and streetlights that cast shadows in the wrong direction. The other cabs turned to follow me, forming a funeral procession of taxis and their inhuman passengers. You have a choice to make, Ray. The echo's voice was softer now, almost sympathetic. You can join the fleet, keep driving forever, carrying passengers between the world of echoes and the world of flesh. Your body will serve, and eventually you'll stop remembering which world is real. And the alternative? You can fight. Break the pattern, refuse to serve. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried genuine sadness. But fighting means destroying the bridge between worlds, and that means trapping all of us here forever. Every echo, every incomplete story, every unfinished piece of business that's accumulated in Bentonville over the past century. The procession continued through streets that existed only in the spaces between certainty and possibility. I could feel the weight of decision pressing down on me. The terrible mathematics of choosing between personal freedom and cosmic responsibility. That's when I noticed the meter. Jimmy's custom-built meter was spinning wildly, its analog dials moving in patterns that looked almost like language. Numbers cascaded across its face, coordinates, timestamps, calculations that hurt to look at directly. And in the center of it all, a single word appeared in glowing letters. Escape. On the meter, I whispered. What about it? But I was already reaching for the device, my fingers closing around wires and circuits that hummed with electricity and something else, intention, maybe, or hope, crystallized into electronic form. Jimmy knew, I said. He knew this would happen. The meter isn't just counting fares, it's mapping the spaces between worlds. The echo of Ray Mercer lunged forward, her hands reaching for mine. Don't touch that. I yanked the meter free from its housing. Sparks flew, the radio exploded in a shower of static and smoke, and the impossible downtown began to flicker like a bad television signal. If I destroy the bridge, I shouted over the growing electronic shriek, what happens to you? Her face, my face, was twisted with desperation and rage. We fade. We become nothing. We never get to be real. But the living stay living. She nodded, tears streaming down cheeks that looked exactly like mine. I smashed the meter against the dashboard. The destruction of Jimmy's custom meter created a cascade failure that propagated through whatever system had been keeping Bentonville's echoes anchored to the living world. The ghost downtown collapsed first, buildings folding in on themselves like houses of cards caught in a windstorm. The other cabs vanished one by one, taking their impossible passengers back into whatever void they'd emerged from. The echo of Ray Mercer screamed as she began to fade, her carefully constructed humanity dissolving into wisps of memory and unfulfilled possibility. You don't understand, she whispered as transparency claimed her. We were the ones keeping it contained. Without us to ferry them back and forth, they'll find other ways through. Worse ways. Then she was gone, and I was alone in cab 77, speeding through the real Bentonville at 3:33 a.m., with sparks flying from the ruined radio and the smell of burned electronics filling the cab. I drove east, as Jimmy had instructed, but the sunrise never came. The digital clock on my phone showed 3:44 a.m. and refused to advance. The darkness outside remained complete, without even the faintest hint of approaching dawn. And beneath the city's ever-present hum, I could hear something new, a sound like whispers in a language I didn't recognize, growing steadily louder. That's when I realized the truth. The echo of Ray Mercer had been lying about some things and telling the truth about others. The cabs and their passengers weren't the source of Bentonville's supernatural problems. They were a symptom, a release valve, a way for the accumulated weight of unfinished business to bleed off gradually instead of building towards something catastrophic. By destroying the meter, I hadn't freed myself from the supernatural taxi service. I'd removed the one thing that had been keeping Bentonville's deeper darkness under control. The radio, despite being a smoldering ruin, crackled back to life. Unit 77, priority pickup, Bentonville Cemetery, passenger destination, anywhere with doors still open. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw myself, the real Ray Mercer, tired and scared and completely out of his depth. But behind my reflection, shapes were moving in the darkness of the back seat. Multiple passengers, their faces indistinct, but their intentions absolutely clear. They weren't echoes anymore. They were something older, hungrier, more desperate. The things that had been feeding on the echoes, growing stronger while remaining hidden behind the facade of a supernatural taxi service. And now they were ready to ride. So, that's my story. That's how Ray Mercer, down on his luck cab driver, became patient zero for whatever's about to happen to Bentonville. I'm parked in Holloman's cornfield now, 3 miles east of town, with entities I can't see but can definitely feel moving around in my back seat. They whisper constantly in voices like wind through dry leaves, and occasionally I catch fragments, coordinates, names of streets that don't exist yet, plans that involve spreading beyond the borders of this one small town. The clock on my phone still shows 3:44 a.m. The darkness is absolute, and in the distance I can see lights beginning to appear. Not street lights or house lights, but something else entirely. Lights that pulse with their own rhythm, that cast shadows in impossible directions, that seem to be moving steadily outward from Bentonville's center. I tried calling the police, the state patrol, anyone who might listen. No signal. The phone shows full bars, but when I dial, I get only silence and that ever-present hum that's growing stronger by the minute. The thing is, I don't think this is just about Bentonville anymore. I think Bentonville was just the testing ground, the place where they worked out the logistics of moving between worlds. Now that the containment system is broken, they're ready for broader operations. So, if you're listening to this, if this recording somehow makes it beyond the borders of whatever Bentonville is becoming, here's what you need to know. Don't drive for taxi companies that operate only at night. Don't accept fares to addresses that exist in the spaces between other addresses. And if you ever find yourself in a town where the GPS stops working after midnight, and there's a constant hum in the air that sounds like the world's largest electrical transformer, just keep driving, don't stop, don't look in the mirrors, and whatever you do, don't try to help. Some problems can't be solved by individual action. Some darkness is too vast for any one person to contain. Sometimes the best thing you can do is run and warn others to run too. The sound of car doors opening and closing without human intervention, whispered voices growing louder. They're ready to leave now, ready to expand operations beyond this little corner of nowhere, Indiana. And I'm going to be their driver, whether I want to or not. If anyone finds this recording, don't come looking for Ray Mercer. Don't try to investigate what happened in Bentonville. Just spread the word. If you see cab 77 on the highway at night, if you get a call for a pickup from city cabs, if anyone ever asks you to drive to an intersection called Cross Point and Hollow, just keep driving. Just keep static. The recording ends. This digital recorder was discovered October 31st, 2024, in an abandoned taxi approximately 50 miles north of Bentonville, Indiana. The vehicle was registered to City Cabs, but according to state business records, no such company has operated in Bentonville since 1987. The town of Bentonville itself appears to have been abandoned sometime in late September 2024. All residents have vanished without trace. The only evidence of their existence are property records and a taxi company handbook found scattered throughout the empty buildings. Highway 9, which previously connected Bentonville to the interstate system, now terminates at an empty field. GPS systems show no record of the town's existence. Satellite imagery reveals only agricultural land where Bentonville should be. However, drivers traveling I-70 through Indiana have reported seeing taxicabs with City Cabs livery operating on the highway between 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock. These vehicles appear to pick up hitchhikers and passengers at rest stops, then disappear from the highway system without reaching any recorded destination. State Patrol has issued an advisory. Do not accept rides from any taxi service operating on highways during overnight hours. Do not attempt to flag down or interact with City Cabs vehicles. Report sightings to the Highway Patrol immediately, but do not pursue or investigate personally. The investigation into Ray Mercer's disappearance remains open, though it is classified as a cold case due to lack of physical evidence or credible leads. This recording is being made available to researchers studying paranormal highway phenomena and unexplained disappearances in the Midwest Corridor. All inquiries should be directed to the Indiana State Police Paranormal Investigation Unit. Do not attempt to locate or investigate Bentonville, Indiana. Do not drive Highway 9 between the hours of 2 o'clock and 5 o'clock. Do not ride in taxis that are not affiliated with established licensed transportation companies. Some echoes are better left unanswered. End of documentation.